The top story this hour: Ethiopia rejects unwelcome meddling by Arab League. Gungat. An incestuous relationship between TPLF, Western politics and their media tapped shameful. A very warm welcome to Addis News Hour. I'm Solomon Danye. Thanks for joining me. Ethiopia rejects the unwelcome meddling by the League of Arab States on the matter of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam following the League's submission of a letter to the UN Security Council and UN General Assembly to intervene in the matter. The Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia, Demeke Mekonnen, sent a letter to the President of the UNSC on Monday, stating that his country is disappointed by the Arab League for addressing the UN on a matter that does not fall within its purview. The League of Arab States has a reputation for its unfettered and unconditional support to any claim Egypt has presented on the issue of the Nile, the letter indicates. The approach followed by the League risks undermining the friendly and cooperative relations between AU and the Arab League, since the trilateral negotiation on the GERD is underway under the auspices of the African Union, the letter adds. The letter further states that Ethiopia is engaging in the trilateral negotiations in good faith and continuing its utmost commitment to make the AU-led process a success. Ethiopia also reiterates its request for the international community to encourage Egypt and Sudan to abide by the accepted principles of international law on the utilization of transboundary water resources. The conflict in Tigray undergoes a dramatic turn. Disinformation and outright fake news, particularly by the TPLF and its Western allies, continue to baffle the world. The idea that media outlets fail to grasp the complexities of a conflict is hardly news, but the bias in favor of the TPLF was striking nonetheless. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has told lawmakers on Monday that the Western world must grasp the real essence of the conflict in Tigray on TPLF's deliberate distortions before jumping to conclusions. Abtam Ashagri tells us more.
The TPLF has claimed victory after having regained control of Mekelle, the regional capital, while it was evidently clear that the Ethiopian government withdraws to give the people of Tigray a chance to reflect on events and make decisions. One noticeable aspect of this total war has been the continued use of disinformation and outright fake news. This media battle has only occasionally been directed towards an internal audience. The real target were the Western news outlet and their trail of Western aid organizations and Western policy makers. For many Ethiopians and foreign observers, the most striking element of the news coverage of the Tigray war was the fact that it took such an obvious anti-government point of view. The idea that media outlets fail to grasp the complexities of a conflict is hardly news, but the bias in favor of the TPLF was striking nonetheless. What every single media outlet failed to consider are the opponents in this terrible war, variously described as rebels or as the elected government of Tigray region. Their questionable track record during their 30 years in power are never mentioned. It would seem that TPLF is a democratic movement struggling against the onslaught of a dictatorial monster. Not a word about the fact that the TPLF ruled Ethiopia as one of the continent's most autocratic regimes. Its regime includes political persecution, outright ballot rigging, widespread corruption, and 2 full-scale wars in just over a decade against Eritrea in 1998 up to 2000 and in Somalia in 2006 up to 2009. Against Eritrea in 1998-2000 and in Somalia in 2006-2009. Not exactly peacemakers, to be fair, the article argued. every single aspect of the war has been automatically blamed on the central government. The refugees are fleeing because of them, not because of the TPLF is recruiting in mass in village after village and good luck refusing their requests. The writer argued that in Ethiopia, concerns over disinformation, fake news and grievances politics by ethnic nationalist groups such as the TPLF and OLF Shane have intensified in recent years. Policy makers, researchers and observers worry that these groups team up with notorious Western journalists to spread false narratives and disseminate rumors in order to shape international opinion and by extension government policies. The writer mentioned some of the notorious include Alex Diwal, a scholar on African political affairs who has openly mentioned in his books his admiration for former Ethiopian Prime Minister Meles Zenawi and his TPLF party. Jetil Tronvol is another such case. In his many media appearances, he can barely hide his satisfaction at being in daily contact with the TPLF leadership. In both cases, these scholars have house to fill explaining the perfidy of the Ethiopian central government and not a word to say about potential TPLF misbehavior and crimes. Their silence in this regard is defeating. As for the BBC, which likes to see itself pontificating from the summits of good journalism, its BBC Tigrinya editor recently joined the TPLF fighters. The writer observed that homework not done by Western powers has led to misguided policy actions. Ethiopians feel betrayed and disappointed by this bad reporting and policy measures. The Western media's reporting on the conflict both in northern Ethiopia and the rest of the country has been unbalanced and consistently based against Ethiopia, he argued. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed told lawmakers on Monday that the Western world must grasp the real essence of the conflict in Tigray and TPLF's deliberate distortions before jumping into conclusions.
What's really surprising and what I want you to also understand is that in the past years we have done a lot of activities have been done in that area and no media was resonating that. The past 2 days the international media, the way it's reporting is surprising. It shows that Ethiopians should awaken. The media that refrained from reporting that remarkable execution of election is reporting this. We will not follow that path.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed on Monday disclosed Ethiopia's plan to cut the number of its embassies by half. The Premier announced the measure as part of his government's latest move in a bid to save foreign currency expense. Thomas McGraw has more.
In a briefing to House of People of Representatives, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said Ethiopia will cut the number of its embassies by half to manage costs, with most diplomats working as non-resident ambassadors from home. The Premier was heard of saying Ethiopia should not have 60 or so embassies and consulates around the world in the present moment. Abiy disclosed that at least 30 of Ethiopian embassies will be closed in the coming Ethiopian year, and ambassadors will make field trips to meet with officials basing at this as their permanent location.
ዲፕሎማሲን በሚመለከት ተቋሙን ማደስ ተቋሙን በከፍተኛ ሪፎርም መቀየር ያስፈልጋል።
Concerning diplomacy, we need to reform Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ethiopia shouldn't have 60 or so embassies and consulates presently. Instead of spending United States dollars all over the place in the next 6 months to 1 year period, at least 6 embassies should be closed and the ambassadors instead should be here. I hope Foreign Affairs Ministry will take some corrective actions to solve this problem.
The Premier forwarded his appreciation to Ethiopians living abroad for defending their country interest and act as alternative ambassadors. Abiy underscored that government is working to bring forth young diplomats and called on Ethiopians living abroad to continue defending their country interests.
በርካታ ወጣቶች ሰልጥነው ወደ ውጭ ጉዳይ ተቀላቅለዋል። ገና ቢሆንም በሂደት ተቋሙ ይጠናከራል የሚል ግምት አለ።
We trained many young diplomats, and I believe Foreign Affairs Ministry will be better in the near future. We also noticed several individuals, both in United States and Europe, who did better jobs than our former ambassadors. We never paid them a penny, but they contributed a lot. We need to mobilize the diaspora community effort and make it relevant to our country.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed disclosed the reduction of Ethiopian embassies around the world as a measure to reduce cost, yet how much money Ethiopia intends to save by implementing this plan is not clear.
The TPLF group that were pursuing continued its belligerence to protect few individuals. In furtherance of its agenda, it began conscripting young and elderly civilians, women and men, to fight highly trained and armed men of their country. This exposed the people in Tigray for the military confrontation that are not prepared for. We will augment humanitarian efforts in the region, including distribution of food and non-food items from warehouses across Tigray. The National Disaster Risk Management Commission and the 5 humanitarian agencies deployed in all waradas of the region are set to resume their function. Following the organization of peaceful and successful national elections this month, efforts are now geared towards building a stronger, united, and democratic country. In this connection, the Ethiopian government is developing a roadmap for inclusive dialogue to ensure a lasting peace and stability.
Renewed killings and massacres of civilians perpetrated by the TPLF troops have been reported in the Tigray state barely a day after the announced ceasefire by Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. According to the African Medias Council source, dozens of administrators considered to be collaborators of the Ethiopian government have been massacred in cold blood by members of the TPLF, and killings have been reported on nearly a daily basis. The pressure from the international community to withdraw Eritrean troops and later Ethiopian troops from Tigray has permitted the surviving TPLF forces to emerge from their hideouts and resume their destabilization of Ethiopia, which was initiated since their outset from the federal government and the accession of Abiy Ahmed. It says the United States and the European Union might have to meet again to address the position they earlier took to support a terrorist movement that used a humanitarian disguise, campaign and disinformation supported by Western media, which projected executioners as victims. Ethiopian religious leaders have expressed their concern that economic independence is critical to avert undesirable challenges from external forces. They made their remark on the consultation forum by Ethiopia's Interreligious Council in collaboration with Commercial Bank of Ethiopia. They also called on indigenous financial institutions to support efforts of Ethiopia's Interreligious Council in building social values, peace and development in the country. Jerusalem Bazaar reports.
Ethiopia is a multi-ethnic nation endowed with diversified culture, language, faith, religion and rich history. Accommodating all their differences, Ethiopians have been living in peaceful coexistence for centuries, and this has become a living witness for the rest of the world. That's why, with the aim of amplifying the role of independent religious institutions and indigenous financial institutions in nation building, a national consultation forum has held here in the capital, Addis, on Monday. The session highlighted most of external interferences are coming from dependencies of finance. Therefore, indigenous financial institutions support is needed to sustain efforts of religious institutions in peace building of the nation.
Collaboration work among local financial institutions and religious institutions is significant in ensuring peace in the country. Not only this is another way of tackling undesirable external forces interference due to finance. Indigenous financial institutions are aware of their people's social value, religious philosophy and culture. Therefore, they have been standing with Ethiopian religious institutions because they are indigenous. At the same time, our religious financial institutions could also be equipped with sustainable finance to realize their activities in national building on the basis of Ethiopians' social makeup.
Instability or loss of peace may be affected all walks of lives, such as financial institutions are directly affected by unrest in Ethiopia.
There is no cost we spare for peace. We have to preserve our country's peace. Religious institutions have also a huge responsibility in keeping Ethiopia's peace because they have many Ethiopian religious followers. Our bank has not any intention to support specifically one religious institution because we are a financial institution. Therefore, we will support efforts of Ethiopia's Interreligious Council in nation building because we are directly affected due to loss of peace.
One of the research presenters in the consultation forum, Galata Simeso, has stressed on the potential areas of collaboration to both religious and financial institutions.
The people, on the one hand, who are clients for the financial institutions are constituencies for congregants for the religious institutions. So they serve as common denominators. If the religious institutes work on the values and ethical standards and equity and social inclusion and things like that, because these are teachings of religion, although they can be found here and there in other sectors. If they work strongly on that, they can create conducive environment, be it for finance or any other institution.
Talking to ETV English, Abu Naragawi, head of foreign relations in the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, said that economic independence is critical to avert any international interferences, not only on religious institutions, but also on Ethiopia's endeavor at large.
To build up our economic values and financial values, and freed our financial support from the abroad. So we have to work hard and also build up and lift up our country, especially for financial matters, economic matters. So each and every Ethiopians and even institutions can be played a main role for the freedom of ourselves from financial slavery.
The Ethiopia's Religious Council also called on other indigenous financial institutions to support the council and ensure economic independence in all development journey of Ethiopia.
Efficient predators.
Ethiopia's digital diplomacy team has played a irreplaceable role in reaching out the international community with different languages. Members of the digital diplomacy team said they've been doing their level best countering the erroneous narratives by Egyptian media outlets on the good. Ola Teklamarab tells us more.
Egypt is a major regional media player. Its press is one of the most influential and widely read in the region, and its TV and film industry supplies much of the Arab-speaking world with shows from its media production city. Egypt has got over 200 broadcast and print media outlets, helping the country amplify its dominance in the region. In connection to the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam project, these media organizations have been misinforming the rest of the world, mainly the Arab-speaking nations. And the breaking news of the second filling of Gert Reservoir creates huge muddle among Egypt and Sudan.
The law riparian countries, particularly Egypt, intends to stop the filling of the second Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam reservoir if they can do so. If not, they will try to intimidate us, circulating phony propaganda. They took the issues of Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam to African Union, and later shifted to the Arab League and the United Nations Security Council for different purposes.
Lie has become a systematic job of Egyptian media. They falsely transcribe Amharic remarks of Ethiopian government officials. The Egyptian media and their activists have been frequently setting such propaganda since the inception of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam.
However, the counterattack from the Ethiopian side in the digital diplomacy has so far achieved remarkable results.
The Arab media is celebrating on the latest developments in Tigray, describing Ethiopia in a bad manner. But my colleagues in the Arabic department are doing well in giving possible feedback to their propaganda.
Previously, there has never been any organized team to address the Arab world with regard to the Ethiopia's natural and legal rights on the Nile River. But these days, things have been changed and our digital diplomacy is working hard to address our issues.
Ethiopia has organized a digital diplomacy team to communicate the world with 5 different international languages about the GERD. Many Ethiopians are rejoicing over the news, heralding the second filling of the GERD reservoir.
Welcome back. You're watching Addis News Hour. Ethiopian government decision to declare a unilateral ceasefire in the state of Tigray is a prudent move. The human rights lawyer, political science and international relations expert Alemayehu Gebramariam made this remark in an exclusive interview with ETV. The professor also argues that the wrong narratives being circulated by some Western media still show their clear conspiracy against Ethiopia, which is none other than their plot to bring TPLF back to power. Gzachew Derab has interviewed him, and Shfarao Lako presents the story as follows.
The Ethio-American scholar Professor Alemayehu Gebramariam, aka Al-Mariam, is known for his serious and striking comments and articles that he regularly writes. ETV approached him for his comments regarding the recent unilateral ceasefire in the state of Tigray. Since the National Defense Force has accomplished its task in the state of Tigray, the decision made to withdraw them is sensible, he said.
Well, that was a prudent decision. The Ethiopian government assessed the overall situation and determined that a strategic withdrawal would serve a multiplicity of purposes. The original mission of the Ethiopian army in Tigray region was to capture, apprehend, and bring to justice those individuals who planned, financed, organized, and coordinated the attack on the Northern Command.
A number of other factors, such as the farming season and wrong narratives being circulated around the National Defense Force, also justify the decision made, he added.
They need to take a pause and see precisely what the role of the Ethiopian government had been over the past 8 months. And so it was a good decision, but there were many motivating factors, as I said. The planting season is upon us now. If the conflict continues, it's going to be very difficult to have the farmers do the tilling and so forth. Humanitarian assistance needed to be delivered without obstruction. And it was a net drain on the national treasury. And Ethiopia also has a number of other priorities, including development priorities and the potential threats from elsewhere. And so the government had to redirect and reassess its both its strategic and overall calculation with respect to its continued engagement at that level in Tigray.
This being as it is, he reiterated that the wrong narratives by some Western media still show the clear conspiracy against Ethiopia.
And I know this is a very grave and serious charge to make, but I believe that there is a conspiracy between the United States, the European Union, and other countries to do two things. One, to undermine the current Ethiopian government and ultimately to restore the TPLF back to power. So everything that they do is calculated to achieve those objectives. And some of the things that you just mentioned about the kind of pressure that they've been applying on the Ethiopian government is aimed at achieving the objective of walking the TPLF to power, as opposed to what they had intended to do when they declared war on the Northern Command through what they call a blitzkrieg, Mabrakawi. Through a lightning strike that they would be able to capture a state power within a week or two, or probably no more than a month. That didn't work, and so now they're relying on the diplomatic muscle of the United States and the European Union, principally using sanctions and other pressures to bring Ethiopia to its knees.
Professor Alemayehu has called on some Westerners to stop engaging in teeth gnashing and finger wagging at Ethiopia over Tigray.
The Ministry of Transport says the nation is vigorously modernizing its transport and logistics services in a bid to drive strong global economic relations. The Minister of Transport, Dagmawit Moges, said that the major activity of the logistics performance appraisal is part of the 10-year development plan that could help boost the logistics performance across the nation. Kazan Jane reports.
In an event organized by the Ministry of Transport to evaluate the performance of the logistics service system, Transport Minister Dagmawit Moges said the government of Ethiopia has been undertaking sweeping economic reforms aimed at strengthening the active involvement of the private sector and reinvigorating the economy. Minister said that the logistics sector was close to foreign investors so far.
Our target in our 10-year perspective plan is to improve the level of performance of our logistics from where we have it now as 126 from 160 countries to that of to be a state of 40s. The logistics sector has been, especially with related to dry port development, with related to freight provision and others, it was closed for foreign investors. And most of the activities even used to be done by the government. But after the ratification of the revised logistic regulation by the Council of Ministers, major areas in the logistics sector are already opened up for the private sector engagement, both domestic and foreign investors.
She further pinpointed that the government has prioritized improving logistics and transportation through solving the tracking and tracing problems in the warehouses, among its various economic reforms as part.
We believe we need to have a cargo tracking system. It is one of the interventions that's being carried out by Customs Commission. So when it is finalized, definitely we will be able to trace the whereabouts of our cargoes, and that's going to help us to know the kind of commodities that we have in hand and the limitations or the gaps that are required, and then take the necessary step accordingly. And definitely this is going to address the different sabotage and other things that we see in the trade system.
World Bank Ethiopia Country Office Charles Kunaka also stated that Ethiopia is striving to exert its efforts working exhaustively in modernizing the logistics sector, noting it will be of paramount importance to increase national growth.
We observe that the performance of the Ethiopia logistics system is about average, whereas a lot of the major economies in the world, they've got scores above 3, for instance. Here in Ethiopia, we're observing a score of about 2.5. Thereabouts, and therefore there is some work that still needs to be done in order to continue improving the performance of the logistics system so that it is at par with some of the best economies on the continent and also more so internationally, since a lot of the trade between Ethiopia and the rest of the world is with countries outside the continent of Africa.
Through proving the implementation of various logistics strategies following the ongoing reforms in the country, the government ought to adjust a suitable environment to anchor investors' involvement in the sector, according to logistics advisor Matteo Sincermo.
The issue when you attract the FDI, foreign direct investment, there are variables that you have to consider. For example, conducive investment environment like tax holidays, quality of raw material availability, facilities available like infrastructure issues, quality of raw material, quality of cheap labor, and these are like the variables that you consider when you attract FDI. But what you should not miss is the logistical issue, that the cost is associated to moving goods for the industries, and the finished goods that you may move back to the market. Maybe the market is in the foreign market, and they consider these logistical costs and time to move back. So logistics has to be competitive to attract FDI, otherwise cheap labor and cheap raw material alone cannot guarantee FDI.
During the occasion, participants on DEPA commended Ethiopia's efforts towards improving the logistics and transportation services within the shortest time possible for the economic growth of the nation.
Ethiopian Airlines has become Africa's top airline in passenger and freight traffic, retaining its leadership position in the continent. According to the African Airlines Association's report, Ethiopian has been ranked first by passenger and cargo traffic in 2020. Ethiopian carried 500,000 tons of freight and 5.5 million passengers through its main hub, Addis Ababa Bole International Airport. Ethiopian topped the list with the highest passenger traffic transported through Addis Ababa Bole International Airport. Ethiopian also topped the list in the most connected countries in Africa due to Ethiopian Airlines' large number of direct flights within the continent.
see the best of us, the best of us. I wanna see the rest of us, the best of us. I wanna see the best of us, the best of us.
This is Addis News Hour. A Nobel Peace Prize nominee has accused the Director General of the World Health Organization of allegedly aiding genocide in Ethiopia. American economist David Steinman accused WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus of being a crucial decision maker who directed Ethiopia's security forces' actions from 2013 to 2015. He accused Tedros of being one of 3 officials who were in charge of the security services over that period during which the killing and torturing of Ethiopians took place. Mr. Steinman, a former consulting expert to the U.S. National Security Council, accused Tedros of being involved in the intimidation of opposition candidates and supporters, which included arbitrary arrest and lengthy pre-trial detention. The complaint can only proceed to the Hague Court if it is adopted by prosecutors. It would be the first prosecution of a senior UN figure if it does proceed. Tedros has denied the allegations and any wrongdoing. And before we go, a quick reminder of our top stories. Ethiopia rejects unwelcome meddling by Arab League on GERD. An incestuous relationship between TPLF, Western politics and their media dubbed shameful.